What do you make of the new setup, the lights, and you're turning up as if you've just trained with the true Geordie?
I'm leaving again for another 6 episodes.
Excellent. Right, well, since we're all back together again, we should probably get started. We've done the whole pretending not to be pals thing, so the fact you actually dislike me is irrelevant. So we're good to go. Alistair?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi everybody, welcome to Talking Lower League. Final fixtures in the Premier Sports Cup, how the lower league sides got on, but most importantly this week we're going to be focusing on the big kick-off this weekend, 31st of July, the SPFL lower leagues kick back off. We're going to be picking some of our favourite fixtures that are coming up this weekend. We're going to be chatting about obviously where we'll be this weekend as well, and to finish off the show we are going to be talking about the price of lower league football as well. The guys know as well as I do there's been a lot of discussion this week about the price of lower league football. Are people being priced out? Is it because of COVID? What's going on ultimately? So as ever, a jam-packed show on Talking Lower League, and we're all back together again. Emotional? You emotional?
I'm always emotional.
You emotional?
No.
Let's just get started. Right, guys, in all seriousness, it is actually lovely to be back, the three of us again. The first time we're doing this in person since February, March 2020.
Yes,
obviously Ross Gray to the right of me, that will probably come up at the bottom in case you don't know, and Alistair Sloss. Ali, how are you feeling about being back in person? You look relaxed, you look comfortable despite your new surroundings?
Excited.
Can also just point out that this will be their left. It's your right.
So this will be the person that's watching.
This will be their left.
So you'll be their left.
I will be their left.
And
I just thought that would throw you off. That was the only reason I said it. So.
Okay, so anyway, we've got Ross there and we've got Ali here, and we've got loads to get through. So let's get started. Let's I guess start off with the fact that I've left my phone. Thank you. Thanks.
Do that again.
Don't worry, you won't see this bit.
I'll make sure you do.
Right, let's get started. As we said at the top of the show, we're going to have a quick chat about the final round of games that took place in the Premier Sports Cup, and just have a bit of a quick chat around how some of the lower league sides got on, and maybe what were some of the kind of eye-catching results from the weekend. If it's okay with you guys, I don't know why I'm asking because I'm going to do it. I'm going to kick us off, and just before we get into this as well, you'll see in our very official commercial ad this week as well that Ross and I were actually on Grant Campbell's Footballs podcast as well, looking ahead to the season, so that should be out by the time you're watching or listening to this, so head over to his channels and listen to that, listen to us talking nonsense, not just here obviously but on other people's things as well. And the result I wanted to pull out, and the reason I brought this up, is because a certain Ross Gray predicted that this side would actually win the championship this season, and if anybody that's watching, you can see his face right now. And the result I want to talk about is Hamilton 2, Albion Rovers 2, Hamilton winning 6-5 on penalties. Not only that, but they were 2-0 down to Albion Rovers at home as well. Ross, why do you think Hamilton are going to win the championship?
I just do.
You just do?
Because as I said on Campbell's Footballs, I think that Scott Robinson is the strongest striker that Killie have signed so far, and I don't see that being enough to win them a league. I think that the Aki's team have consistency. Yes, you can argue that they weren't good enough to stay in the Premiership, but a lot of young guys coming through, a lot of exciting talent, and as I've said before, I really like the football that Brian Rice wants to play at Hamilton, so I just think that'll be enough to carry them through.
Ali, what are you making of Hamilton this season?
I think they've got to bounce back successfully. Whether that means consolidating playoff place and pushing on to next year, or trying to get promoted at the first term. I agree with Ross. I think they've got a really good core. They've got a lot of good young players, some experience, and guys that have probably been down at this level before as well. So it's all looking good.
I think I get exactly what I quite like Brian Rice in the way that he tries to play football. It's a very kind of long term thing. We were talking about kind of long term visions on last week's podcast and how important it is for lower league clubs to have them, especially because it's usually the kind of 6 month, 1 year deal type turnover thing, whereas Hamilton giving Brian Rice the new deal despite the relegation as well shows that they are confident in his ability to rebuild a competitive team. Obviously it was expected that they were going to lose O'Doffin as well. Looks like he's away down south to Rotherham, certainly at the time of recording anyway. That's looking the most likely destination. So hopefully, and I think a lot of Hamilton fans have been saying this as well, they need, despite having that core, they do need more reinforcements, I think. And I think using the cash that they get from that will be so important over the first few weeks of the season to kind of reinvest. On the flip side of that though, going back to this result, Albion Rovers, we spoke on Grant's podcast as well. I think Albion Rovers could be a bit of a surprise package in League 2 this season. Ali, we know obviously in the last year or so we've spoken quite a lot about Albion Rovers and their kind of tussle with Brecon aren't there anymore, but do you think Brian Reid could have a bit of a better season this season? I thought they were decent last season.
Yeah, they finished quite strong last season, got in a good position in League 2, and it's about taking that energy and bouncing on. Obviously this is going to be a full season. Last season obviously very different, COVID stripping the season down. Could they have lasted up the distance? Could they have done more with the distance? That's the questions they're going to have to ask. But I think Albion, like you say, with Albion Rovers, the good thing for them is that people don't actually expect a lot from them. So going in with that mentality, looking to take a few scalps and maybe cause a few upsets, yeah, I think it's possible Albion Rovers could finish maybe 6th, 5th.
I was actually going to say that. I was like, you'd probably bite your hand off after the last few seasons for a nice mid-table finish, to be honest. Ross, was there any other games in particular in the League Cup that stood out for you?
Yep. So two teams that we talked about a lot on Campbell's Footballs, and I think we'll be talking about a lot this season. The score for me was Stirling Albion 3, Peterhead 1 at Forth Bank. I think that we both, and I'm sure Ali will agree, I think Stirling Albion are in with a great shout in the title in League 2, one of a number of teams I think this year. Recruited really well. Former Clyde man Martin McNiff scored, fan favourite, shall we say.
Yeah, playoff hero.
Yeah. I think that Stirling Albion, as I say, have recruited really well. I think that Kevin Rutkiewicz has had almost the kind of longevity that some managers in League 2 don't tend to get. Has built a good squad. Yes, they've brought in a good number of players, but I think they've still got a vast majority of the squad that they've had the last couple of years, so they've got that consistency. I think that now they've reinforced well in all areas. I think they're looking strong. Peterhead on the flip side will be disappointed with this result, but looking at the stats, a very open, even game, both teams really going for it, so for all Peterhead will be disappointed to maybe lose this game. I think they will be absolutely fine in League 1 this season. Yeah,
I do. I think they'll be absolutely fine as well. Got that experience, a really, really good core of players. Obviously we spoke about core will probably be the buzzword that comes up in this podcast, but they do actually have a good core of players and that experience in there as well. Plenty of buzzwords been thrown out. And let's be honest, any team with Raymond Grant in the middle of the park is going to be up at the top end of the pitch.
I knew that was coming.
Top end of the league at the same time as well. Just a couple of quick things as well. Ali, I'll get your thoughts as well. Queen of the South running out 4-1 winners over Airdrieonians. Obviously Airdrie, incredibly impressive result, beating local rivals Motherwell 2-0 in the game before. 2 fucking unbelievable goals as well. Quite a exciting kind of young talent coming through at Airdrie as well. Obviously just goes to show in that Motherwell game. And obviously all of our good pal Rowan, obviously big Airdrieonians fan, he watched the game on Saturday and just said, it was night and day in a bad way, obviously. In comparison to the Motherwell game, they just looked as if their heart wasn't in it. He and I'm sure other Airdrie fans thought that this was a perfect opportunity. If they picked up the win, there was a great chance of them progressing, and Queen of the South just ran them riot. I mean, Is inconsistency going to be a problem again for Airdrie in League One, do you think?
I thought I was actually going to say I think that Ian Murray's legacy so far at Airdrie has been inconsistency. Squandered opportunities, especially the season where they got cut short and Wraith Rovers ended up getting promoted. Airdrie were one of the teams at the top that kept surrendering that top spot. Last season as well, there were times it looked like it was all coming together and then for it to fall apart and then come together and fall apart. And again, this has been the story of the League Cup campaign. It seems to be that for the kind of games where it's easier to get motivated, then you get motivated, and for the games where it's not so much, maybe that's where it's sticking in a wee bit. Just trying to find that consistency for Airdrie. I think personally that this has got to be Ian Murray's last chance this season to do anything with Airdrie. I think they should aim for the playoff final at least, and if not, then it may be time to reconsider that position.
He's probably not going to get a better chance, let's be honest, to even go for the title this season. You know, we spoke about that last week, and obviously on the Grant's podcast as well. Grant's podcast is getting some amount of fucking shout outs already. We just started this, but we did speak about it. You know, we spoke about the fact that League One perhaps maybe is not as top heavy as it has been before, and it's more wide open perhaps at the top end. Ali's back a week and he's all ready. You've seen the facial expressions here when I said that. You think League One's still top heavy? I don't mean to like tower over you here, but
I think personally League One's top 4 picks itself.
Go for it.
Queen's Park, Falkirk, Airdrie, Cove. Any order.
Right, okay. So you went from it picks itself to then, okay, I've just given you 4 teams and they'll finish anywhere.
Yeah, but my point being...
Put your cards on the table.
My point being the top 4 picks itself. Anything after that is what I think the rest of the pack are chasing. Personally, I think Cove are going to win the league.
Well, I actually agree with them, but as a wee side thing, not in this podcast, but as a wee side thing, so keep an eye on our social media channels. We still need to get Alistair's full predictions, and we have a punishment for Alistair as well if he is the worst of us this season. So not in this podcast, so keep an eye on our social media channels because that is going to come out separately.
I've known me for a long time, and you know that shame isn't a punishment for me. So you have to think about it.
We're going to have to aim high.
We're going to have to aim very, very high. We've got a rough idea, but that might change after you're being nonchalant about the top 4 of League One. Right guys, obviously it's time to get to the next part of the show, which is looking ahead to the big kick-off in the SPFL lower leagues. Right guys, we're back after everybody thinks that we've had a break. Championship, League 1, League 2 all kick off on Saturday, all 3 o'clock kick-offs. Hopefully as many fans as possible back into grounds, including us as well, supporting our team. Let's start with the Championship. Ross, I'm going to come to you if that's okay. I'm sliding my phone forward in case you're ever be nosy as well at the fixtures. Don't say I'm not good to you. Is there a particular fixture that stands out for you?
Yeah, for me it's Arbroath versus Inverness at Gayfield. I have said, I think on both our podcasts and Grant's, here's another plug, that I don't know what to expect Inverness this season. I think that the recruitment has been interesting in a word, but I think they could be a kind of unknown commodity almost. We know what Arbroath can do. We know that teams don't like going to Gayfield. We know that they use every part of the ground to their advantage. Use
the waves,
nature itself.
Yeah.
As Dick Campbell, sorry, he's the ocean master, but
yep. I think that's a conversation for another podcast, but
we'll agree to disagree. I'm very interested to see, if Inverness are still kind of gelling and they're still trying to get that cohesion. I think this could be an early winner for Arbroath. They've still very much got the squad that they've had success with over the last couple of years. As we always say, you can never write off a Dick Campbell team, but just the big question mark for me, as I say, is Inverness. So I can't call the game. I think it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out.
I actually do fancy Arbroath in this one, to be honest, especially at home. I think they'll look at this and go, this is the perfect chance to get a big 3 points on the board. Because obviously I do think that there's a slight unknown commodity about Arbroath, which is probably the opposite what you would actually usually say about Arbroath, but I do think in this championship, I just don't know how it's going to go. People are predicting they're going to finish bottom, people are predicting they're going to be just outside the playoffs. I think they might be in between that, to be honest. I do think they will be okay this season. I don't know if it's just a Dick Campbell loving as ever on Talking Lower League, but I'm confident they will be okay. And I do think they'll fancy the 3 points here. Before I come to you, Ali, just quickly, a game that really stands out for me, Wraith Rovers against Ross Gray's champion-elect Hamilton Academical. Two sides that will be thinking that they should at least be in the playoff picture this season. I think that Wraith Rovers have really solidified their backline. Not that it was bad last season. I think the potential combination this season of Tom Lang, obviously friend of the podcast, coming in at the back from an injury, looks as if he's been getting some game time before the kick-off, alongside a very impressive Christoph Berra. He's had a very good summer and a good pre-season for Wraith. I think that combination could be good. Obviously you've still got Kyle Benedictus there as well. We mentioned, we've spoke a lot about Reagan Tumulty as well. I think he's absolutely fantastic. I think that backline's great. Maybe I'm not quite convinced by them as much going forward this season, but I do still think they will believe that they should be up and around that playoff. And I think it's a very, very tough start for Hamilton. And it'll be very interesting. Probably actually this game's probably a few weeks early for them, because I think they'll probably want to bring in some reinforcements from the Old Orphan money as well. So yeah, again, wouldn't surprise me to see Wraith Rovers kind of being victorious in this game. Ali, what about you? You kind of agreeing with any of our games, or have you got another one?
The fixture computer pulling its usual tricks for the first game of the season, throwing in what must be the first Ayrshire derby in the league for a very long time.
Yep.
Isn't it funny how that happens?
Day one. It was Partick v Clayton day one.
I know.
And there's also another derby later on in the league as well. Ayr versus Kilmarnock. Ayr are for me going to be a very unknown prospect this season. Obviously they've went full Morton, which is really funny. I'm not going to lie. I like it.
Morton have went through a rebrand.
Getting Jim Duffy on board has been a good bit of business. Probably,
yeah.
I think maybe their best business of the summer.
Yeah.
Apart from Aidan McAdams, really. But Ayr United reinforcing in the right areas. They've got a good, experienced coaching team there. Know the leagues. Signed half of Morton's team, so they obviously know the league. But with that, it's like players that are coming in that are trusted by the managers, so that's always a good sign. Kilmarnock, how have they ended up here?
The too big to go down in Scottish football?
A few years ago, like with Steve Clark in.
I know. Europe.
And Angelo,
maybe they don't want to talk about Europe, but yeah, they got to Europe at least.
We could do a whole podcast and the media reaction to Angelo Alessio being blamed for this, like 2 years after he left, which was...
And they were sitting fifth in the league and they had one of the best defensive records.
Genuinely disgraceful.
Yep.
And we wonder why calibre foreign coaches and foreign players might not find Scotland to be an attractive destination.
And you also wonder why the mainstream media is so at times looked down upon in Scottish football, and people actually spend the time listening to us because of that as well. But anyway, sorry, earlier we were talking about Kilmarnock.
And then I think the part of the issues with Kilmarnock is your guys in the media, like your Chris Boyds, etc., don't really want to point the blame where I think everyone knows it was. And for me, that was with kind of like the guys that had been there a while, your Alan Powers, your Kirk Broadfoots, maybe not wanting to play for managers, maybe a bit of a boys' club in the dressing room. They've now left. I've been really, really impressed with Kilmarnock's recruitment. Really impressed, bringing in... I think they've actually got a better squad now than they did last season. I think Danny Armstrong, great addition from Wraith Rovers. he's one of the players that you would have wanted to pick up if you were coming into the Championship. The only other one I think would have been a more attractive prospect would have been a Regan Hendry, someone of that calibre. Scott Robinson from Livingston, I was really impressed every time I saw him. He has that kind of talismanic, every time he gets the ball you think something is going to happen.
He can have quite a kind of unorthodox approach at times, which can throw off defenders as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Liam Polworth could have easily got a club. If he'd turned up at, say, Hibs or something, no one would have really batted an eye. Blair Alston abandoning the Falkirk project 1 season into it. I'm not surprised, he was too good to be there. Blair Alston's a weird player for me. I'm not sure where his best position is, but because of that he can play multiple positions, and that's what, when you come down into the Championship, you need guys to fill in multiple roles. Jason Naismith from Ross County at right back, another great signing. Ewan Murray, talk about your pick of another player that you could hand pick. It's like a game of Championship Manager at times. And you just pick the kind of players you would want. Stephen McGinn adding steel in the middle of the park, an experienced head. Fraser Murray, these are all guys that have played at a good level. They've got experience, and it's like a fresh slate for Kilmarnock with probably, in my opinion, the best manager in the Championship, and Tommy Wright as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though he's not been in the Championship, I still completely agree with you. So you're fancying Kilmarnock? And
I think Ayr are going to do a wee surprise, maybe.
Really?
Maybe 1-0 or 2-1 for Ayr. I wouldn't actually be surprised by that. A lot of expectation for Kilmarnock, and obviously they've brought in all these players, but they've not had a lot of time to play. Did kind of struggle in that League Cup group as well. Only beaten Clyde 2-1, I believe it was.
Stranraer
2-1. East Kilbride struggled there as well. It'll take a while for Kilmarnock to get going, but I think, like what we're talking about, it's easy to get motivated for the games to get motivated for. This game means more for Ayr United and their fans and their players than it will for these guys at Kilmarnock.
I've got a question for each of you before we move on, if that's alright.
Go for it.
For Ali, do you think that Ayr United will finish any higher than 9th?
Any higher than 9th? I do, yeah.
Interesting. Who's saying Arbroath are going to get relegated?
Who's saying Arbroath are going to get relegated?
Who's saying Arbroath are going to get relegated?
Not me, I don't think.
I wasn't threatening.
What are you?
I was asking you a general question.
What accusations are you throwing out? No, I actually think Ayr are in trouble this season, to be honest. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Anyone saying Arbroath are going to get relegated, they've watched with themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
You think so?
I think that Morton are sure to go down.
I think I can understand Morton. I don't understand Ayr being brought into it. I think they've just got slightly enough quality. Arbroath were always going to be in the talks purely because they're the last part-time team in the division. So, if you didn't see this interview with Dick Campbell or read about it, Dick Campbell was talking about how difficult it is to attract part-time players these days. He said that even guys that aren't starting every week for full-time teams in the same leagues, they're offering them, sometimes in some cases, more money than what they're on now. Sometimes they're being offered slightly less, and the players just don't want to go part-time. So that means that for this season, and it could be a COVID thing, because this hasn't really been an issue as long as I can remember. Like, there's always been a lot of guys going part-time, which I'm sure we'll talk about with Cove. But it then meant that he was saying basically all the teams are basically operating in a limited pool, and that pool is basically already who's part-time. So everybody's working in the same pool, in the same network that everyone knows. And he was just kind of basically saying, in terms of Arbroath, he's not going to offer people deals for good money that aren't going to improve his squad.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And aren't going to add anything to the team. So therefore it's hard to attract players, because if you're which Arbroath are, in my opinion, the best ran part-time team in the country, you've now hit a roof. And you have to try you have to try and pick players up from other slightly better part-time teams. But as we all know with part-time football, like, Arbroath trying to pick players up from, for example, Alloa, it's just not going to happen because of travel and etc. So it was quite an interesting interview from the Godfather.
I suppose the other side of that is as well, when you're talking about operating a pool of part-time players, there's West of Scotland League clubs and Lowland League clubs offering more money than some SPFL part-time clubs are.
Yeah.
So again, you're then that pool gets even smaller. So
Well, all we need to do is look at some of the kind of moves that are happening in regards to player movements in the West of Scotland League, for example. Just I think at the time of recording today, I think it was announced David Galt was signed on at Darvel.
Is that who they were announcing?
That's who they were announcing. That's how they broke the internet. Ross was obviously in transit when this move was announced, whilst Alistair and I were sitting here playing PlayStation, doing all our research. I mean,
that's wild.
What a piece of business. But no, I completely understand. I think probably that puts pressure on managers and coaches more than it ever has before, because the finite resources and now what you could maybe call a finite pool of talent is that every decision they make, if it was scrutinised before, it's going to get even more scrutinised. And like I say, we're going to be talking about this so much more as the season goes on. But yeah, very interesting interview if you've not seen it, like Ali says. Right guys, League One kicking off on Saturday. Obviously we are very invested. Well, we're invested in every division because we love you all, but we're very invested in League One. Obviously I need to do it. I'll do it. Right, I'll do it. I'll take the heavy hit. Clyde against Dumbarton, the game that we'll most likely be at on Saturday. Probably the two sides that you could argue at the moment on paper that are going to be fighting it out at the bottom of the table. Obviously from a Clyde perspective, I'm hoping that's not the case. However, we do try and be as pragmatic, realist as possible. I think that Clyde really, really need to get off to a good start and win, and what is hopefully going to be in front of a decent atmosphere and a decent crowd at Broadwood. Ali, obviously, Ross and I have spoke about Clyde an awful lot throughout pre-season and on podcasts and stuff like that. How are you feeling about this first game of the season? That's it. That's the response.
I don't really think you could have picked a worse opening game.
Yeah.
Personally, I think it's going to be, and this is nothing against Dumbarton fans, I think it's going to be a game being played between two poor teams that are both going to have an eye on each other. And the fans are going to be looking at each other's results every single week to see what's happening. I think it's going to be. I think obviously that it's going to be the teams that are at the bottom of the league. I don't really see any other argument about that. Clyde this season doing something a wee bit different. Danny Lennon went on a bizarre rambling about a cake for a while, and how if you keep using the same ingredients to make the same cake, then you're always going to have the same cake.
Yep.
But he didn't like the cake that was being made, so he wanted to make a new cake, so he's getting some new ingredients in.
Because he couldn't get the island?
Because he couldn't get the island of bakers. I don't know what he was talking about, but
I'm so lost.
He was he was basically saying this season he was talking about how he's making a new cake with new ingredients so he could have a different cake, but he didn't know if all the ingredients were going to work together. So he doesn't know what cake he's going to end up with. So we've signed Rob Jones from Dumbarton as a target man for an option B, and we've signed.
I think he's, just to jump in there, sorry Ali, I think he's been made out to be a scapegoat already, and I don't think that's fair at all. I think that some of the positive contributions that he's made in some of the games I've seen over pre-season and in the League Cup, you can imagine him and Goodwillie working well together. Obviously get a good goal at East Kilbride as well, cracking photo as well, very good photo opportunity.
Oh, you mean Rob Jones? Sorry, I thought you meant Danny Lennon was being made out to be a scapegoat.
Oh right, no.
I agree.
Because you see some of the criticism that's already coming in for Rob Jones.
The criticism coming in for Rob Jones is bizarre. Like, I watched a couple of the League Cup games and I thought he played well. There was a moment against Stranraer where he done a step over and double chopped a defender in the box and then had the goal screaming, and he just decided to try and square it to nobody. But he is someone, he's a striker who needs people around him to work for him, but also kind of see him as a guy who needs a lot of confidence. Mm-hmm. He doesn't really seem to kind of believe in his own ability. I think there's a player there I think it's an option B. He wouldn't have been my first pick, but he's not by any means one of the worst players we could have signed for that role. And there's been some, and Danny Lennon has questions have been asked of him as well regarding recruitment. It's kind of difficult because Clyde are in the position where they don't have a great budget. But I mean, Magaro Gomez is a good signing. Adam Livingston coming back, solid enough.
Yep.
I think the signing of Kennedy in Splain could be huge. It might not work out, but it's a gamble. I really like both those players, Kennedy and Splain. It'll take a while for them to kind of work it all together, but it's the same tale for Clyde time and time again. Going forward, they look really good defensively, incredibly poor, and it's like having a Rolls Royce engine and an old Skoda at the moment. It doesn't matter what the foundations need to be good. And for Clyde right now, they don't have good foundations, especially at the back and kind of through the spine.
Can I make
of the teeth.
3 points in this? And I don't want to spend too much longer talking about Clyde because I'm conscious that we'll get bias thrown at us. My first one is a question. So if the insinuation is that Danny Lennon wasn't happy with the cake ingredients, would that be last season that a vast majority of the recruitment was young players from the Old Firm Colts teams or from the Old Firm themselves? Is that the insinuation that was made?
I believe the insinuation is that he brought players in to try and play a specific way, and that wasn't working.
Probably the lack of experience point as well.
Yeah, okay. So then Clyde went out and bought guys that have played predominantly in League 2 for the last couple of years and more young players. So the recruitment question for me is completely valid, of not just Danny Lennon but the recruitment set up at Clyde. The second point was on Rob Jones. I said, I can't remember if it was on Grant's podcast on Talking Lower League last week, I think that anybody criticising Rob Jones just now for not being a goal scorer is requiring help. Rob Jones was not signed to score the amount of goals that David Goodwillie does. Rob Jones was signed to be a nuisance for defenders, to knock defenders about, to make an option for somebody to play off of Goodwillie, because the dependency last season, especially on Goodwillie, was he dropped so far into midfield and became completely ineffectual. For me, Jones is there now to make Goodwillie have to sit right on the last shoulder of defenders and be there to win, Jones to win flick on to plenty of Goodwillie. That's why he's there. It was said by Dumbarton fans, I think Clyde fans really should have, if they haven't already accepted Jones' decision making as questionable, but as you say, Ali, there's a player in there. It's getting to know what the right role is for him and how to work to his strengths, and that'll take time. I find at times criticism that comes Clyde's way, and specific Clyde players' way, is unjustified and incredibly unnecessary, especially at this stage of the season.
I'll give every player at Clyde a chance, and I'll make judgments about November, December once I've seen enough of it.
Yeah.
I know I talk about Clyde quite a lot, but the only comeback for that I would say would be, so far we've not seen Rob Jones playing a 2 with Goodwillie yet.
That's the big thing.
The issue has been that when Rob Jones comes on, we force Goodwillie out wide.
Yes.
Which seems to be again Danny Lennon going back to the way he wants to play and trying to fit players in rather than actually trying to change it. Just play them in a 2. If you're going to bring Rob Jones on, play him in a 2. Goodwillie will work better in a 2. Rob Jones will work better in a 2. It's not particularly difficult.
And I think Saturday will be a big indication of the direction in which both clubs are going to go this season as well. Right, let's try and rattle through a wee bit more in League 1 before League 2. Obviously, Ali, you mentioned them before, Cove Rangers, they're at home to Falkirk. I think quite a lot of people are seeing this as the kind of top 2 going up against it. How do you see this one going, Ross?
I stupidly last week backed Falkirk to win the league. I'm going to 360 in that. I have to say
316 again?
Already. The ball hasn't even been kicked.
Yeah, we're doing the same with Hamilton in a minute.
So if you're 360, you're just picking Falkirk again.
180 then, sorry, is what I meant.
Yes.
Clearly.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Cove. I am saying that Cove Rangers will win League 1, is what I'm saying.
Right, well.
And whatever degree or angle that means that I'm doing it. I'm saying it was
right. So whether it's 360 or 180, they're winning League One, and you think they're going to win on Saturday.
They will win on Saturday. Yes, definitely.
League One wise, is there anything else you would like to talk about? That sounded very much like I was asking you like one of the most emotional questions you're ever going to get asked.
Peterhead to beat Alloa. Discuss.
Well, the two things I'd want to discuss is Cove Rangers recruitment. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
What is
good.
Is this you referencing the 3-year deal for
34-year-old Shea Logan?
34-year-old Shea Logan? Or
it's so good and so stupid at the same time. It's ridiculous, but isn't it? Like,
it is mental.
3-year deal, and I believe Vigors and Draper got a 3-year deal as well.
What?
I think so.
I believe they all get 3-year deals. And like,
see, to be honest, fair enough. Go for it. See if you're going to go for it. Just go for it.
But I mean, quickly looking through their rivals, I mean Morgan Neal from Dumbarton, good signing.
Great, somebody who we
really great
desperately wanted at Clyde, I'm sure.
Vigors and Draper coming into the league to be the best midfielders available. Yeah. Kyle Gurley, great keeper. Shea Logan, they've just bought themselves probably the best fullback in the league. And a great heating and gas engineer apparently. Robbie Leach, great signing. But it's really fun because I like Ross Draper, I like Ian Vigors. Shea Logan's a great signing. I like him as well. 3-year deals is ridiculous, but it's fun. So
it is fun. It is fun, and I think that is what Cove are going to be this season. And I do think that's why they're going to beat Falkirk on the opening day. Very quickly, Ross asked, "Do you think Peterhead are going to beat Alloa on Saturday? Do you think that's going to happen?"
Well, I wanted to talk about Alloa because, for obvious reasons.
Right, it's for anybody who has been listening to the podcast or who's new to the podcast, thanks for wasting your time with us. Ross Gray has already spoken about Barry Ferguson's Alloa, which is what they're going to be called now, obviously, thanks to Go Radio and others. Now, Alistair Sloss talking about a Barry Ferguson team is on another planet in comparison, so even though we have to be as quick as we possibly can because we've still got a lot to get through, I would love to hear your thoughts on Alloa so far.
The recruitment has been interesting.
Okay.
That's very diplomatic of you.
Connor Salmon, one of the few guys that has went.
I like that you started laughing before you even said that. We're off to a good start.
Connor Salmon is one of the few guys who's went full time to part time. Right, he is not worth the money I know that they're paying him. I think that Daniel Church coming in, interesting. Jordan Armstrong, Ben Armour, Mark Durnan, Adam King, Craig Howie, Mark Lamont, Stephen Boyd, Davy Hutton signed. It's
a mixed bag in there.
It's a mixed bag. There's some players like Mark Lamont, I'm surprised he went to Alloa. David Hutton, surprised.
I think Howie will be a good signing.
Howie will be a good signing. Connor Salmon, I think might be a wee bit of a waste. But what I want to talk about is Barry Ferguson going to has he learned his lesson? Has Keelty changed him? Do you see him sticking with these guys, or do you see him getting to January kind of spitting the dummy out a wee bit and bringing in new guys as he had done previously when he was at Clyde in League 2? And fair enough, that was a long time ago. He's a rookie manager. But my question is the appointment of Barry Ferguson and Bob Malcolm a step too far for them at this point, from an Alloa point of view, considering they'll be looking to bounce back into the Championship? Is this a case of it was a better move for Ferguson and Malcolm than it was for Alloa? They've got more to gain and Alloa have got a lot more to lose.
I don't know, because I think Ferguson was onto something good at Kelty, so I don't know. I think that probably Alloa will have caveated Ferguson's appointment with, you can't come in and every 6 months do either at Clyde and just have a massive squad turnover. They probably don't have the money, having dropped out of the Championship, and that is very assumptuous. I mean, if that is the case, then I'll put my hands up and apologise for that. But
see, to be honest, Ross, I've got a funny feeling they'll give him full free rein.
I think so.
I genuinely think they will. I think that is the caveat of getting Barry Ferguson, is he has to be in charge of pretty much everything. See, all joking aside, right, because we've spoken a lot about Barry Ferguson obviously on the podcast since we started it, I genuinely hope from a lower league perspective that he has learned his lessons from Clyde and obviously done a good job with Kelty Hearts, getting them up and stuff like that. Brought in some great players, obviously players that are championship level, so they were expected to go up, which they did obviously, and he delivered that, and fair play to him. I genuinely hope he has learned his lessons, and if they're sitting just outside the playoffs in January or they're struggling or whatever, that he doesn't then rip it up and go out and bring in another 7 or 8 players, because we know that approach very rarely works. So I'm really hoping, I genuinely, all joking aside, I really hope that he has learned his lessons. Am I convinced? Not really. No. To be honest, is what I'm going to say.
See, when I was saying earlier on that the League One top 4 picks itself, the only reason I didn't put Alloa in there was because of Barry Ferguson and Bob Malcolm. And I know you were talking about Kelty. If he hadn't delivered, then his managerial career would have been over.
Yeah.
I think Dylan said this last week, Ali. It's the same thing here. He's probably got more to lose here than he did having Kelty a season in League 2.
Yeah.
If he now bombs this, I think that's Ferguson at any level in the SPFL done.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. I actually think he would make a fantastic coach somewhere.
Yeah.
I think
we've said that for a long time.
I think he's got all the attributes of a good coach. I just don't think he's, it's maybe not fair to say, I don't think he's got in it maybe a good man-to-man manager.
Yeah, no, I'll agree with you there. When he falls out with a player, that's it, done.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And he needs someone to kind of, I think he's a very emotional, reactive guy, and he needs someone there to kind of ground him and maybe take that decision away from him, and Bob Malcolm's not that guy.
No,
Bob Malcolm is, I believe, what they call a facilitator.
That's
an enabler, some of
very good use of very good term there to describe Bob.
Amongst other things.
And on that note, I think it's time we move on to League 2.
Ross, you seen this? Ross, you seen
What is it? What is it?
What is it you're doing?
I'm trying to listen to the latest episode of Campbell's Footballs podcast.
What's that?
It's a podcast with Dr. Grant Campbell where he talks about all things Scottish football.
That sounds actually pretty good. Who's on it this week?
There's 2 arseholes for some podcast called Talking Lower League. They're making wild and just obscene predictions about the SPFL Championship, League 1 and League 2.
Is it on Spotify? Where can you get it?
It's everywhere that you consume your podcasts, Alistair.
Ping me a link.
I will.
Listen to Dr. Grant Campbell's football podcast.
Right,
Cheeto's not even fizzy. What the fuck is that? It's a non-carbon.
There is a decent chance that you will witness that.
Can you please clap that in?
Are you emotionally stable enough to continue, or do we have to call it a night? Or?
I'm okay, carry on.
You're okay?
I'm okay.
Right. Scottish League 2. I sounded a bit like the guy who goes on Gillette Soccer Special with us to go, Scottish League 2 results.
The old video printer voice.
Teletext.
Yeah.
Right, really only one place to start. Spoke about them quite a bit when I was talking about Alloa. Kelty Hearts at home to Cowdenbeath. Ross and I have both tipped Cowdenbeath to be in a bit of trouble this season, despite the emotional reunion of the return of Buchanan. We've also spoken about the fact that I think that Kevin Thompson is the real deal.
You were going to say Kevin Rutkiewicz here?
Who knows what I was going to say there. I'm so glad I managed to pull that back.
Why do you say Kevin Thompson's the real deal?
I just think that anytime I've heard him speak, he's come across really well. I really like kind of the methodology and the way that he coaches. A lot of people genuinely believe in him, and obviously done a lot of good things at Rangers as well. And I think that even the very early signs at Kelty this season, and when I've seen them during the League Cup campaign, they seem really good. And that's why I genuinely think that this could be a real statement victory for them potentially. And yeah, I fancy them to obviously be up there at the end of the season as well. Yeah, but I think they'll do very well on Saturday.
I think they will as well. Kevin Thompson's obviously an unknown quantity, someone who is obviously coming from that Rangers youth set up with a huge reputation. I also remember a certain John Bomber Brown coming from the Rangers you'd set up
Never
with a
in
very big reputation.
Never in a million years thought I would hear John Bomber Brown and Kevin
But
Thompson both in the...
What I found interesting is since Thompson's came in, the recruitment at Kilty's been a bit different. And that says to me maybe one or two things has happened. Kevin Thompson wants to do things a bit differently, or Barry Ferguson was bankrolling the whole thing.
We even took a break and Barry is back in the conversation.
Barry in the mind.
That is interesting because like you look at the players that have came in for Kilty, there's only maybe two players that you would think, wow, they might be a wee bit below their level, are Joe Cardle and Jamie Barjonas, I believe that's Barjonas. Barjonas is a weird one. He's kind of been about a wee bit and never really excelled anywhere, but you wouldn't expect him to turn up at League Two at this point in his career, maybe a season at League One or whatever. But I mean, apart from that, it's Voti Biabi played for Steny last season. Didn't really excel, but made a good account for himself. Jordan Forster and Rhys Peggy and Alfie Aguiman coming in, both of them from the Lowland League. And the thing about all those guys coming in as well, and Barjonas, is that they're young guys.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to kind of be maybe Kevin Thompson's mantra, is going to be get these guys in, maybe give them a good deal, you can maybe move them on for a bit of money, but also think from his experience working at Rangers, I think younger players are easier to manage when you're at the start of your career, because you're not coming up against kind of more experienced guys who might be set in their ways or have certain ideas about how things should be done, etc. And I find it very interesting, just that complete and utter difference, and it's literally been one transfer window.
Yeah.
The difference between Kilty and under Kevin Thompson and Barry Ferguson. I actually do expect them to be up the kind of top end of the table as well, Dylan.
Yeah, absolutely. Ross, two sides that you think will be up at the top end of the table as well. Face Off on Saturday, smash hit movie Face Off. Stenhouse Muir at home to Stirling. Is that us getting sued, or
That's it.
have you just...
It was a...
It's Barry Ferguson's lawyer.
Well,
It's Barry, it's Go Radio saying you guys are never coming on.
A message from for legal reasons, all I could say is a B Malcolm. Sorry, that's actually a wee bit too obvious. It's a Bob N.
Where Malcolm?
We'll just leave it. We'll leave it there. Like you say, for legal and safety reasons. Steny at home to
Stirling
Albion. Two sides that you think will be fighting at the top of League Two. I agree with you. You really buy into the Stephen Swift project at Steny. I think we do as well. And obviously Stirling Albion, I think this is a fantastic opportunity for them to finally potentially lift the title. Has this got draw written all over it, or what do you think?
I'm going all in. I'm going to say I don't think it'll be a big win, but I think Steny will just sneak it. I think that, as I've said last week, I think that these two teams will try and play some good attacking football. I think that they'll both see this as really the season to go kind of almost hell for leather for it and go for the title. So as I say, I rate Stirling Albion. I think they'll be very much in the mix, but I think that Steny might just edge this one. I just think they've got a wee bit more in their squad. Some of the players have signed like that. A lot of guys that Stephen Swift knows and have kind of similar attributes to the squad that had at BSC Glasgow previously. So I think Steny will win, but just. Yeah,
I think that could potentially be up there for kind of fixture of the weekend for me, actually.
Yeah.
Across the SPFL. Before we get on to a chat about the price of lower league football, which yet again we could spend a whole podcast on, and we might actually if this goes down well. Obviously, one that's sticking out for me, Ali, as well, is Albion Rovers at home to Edinburgh City. Edinburgh City, probably another side that maybe we've not spoken quite a lot about. Obviously, done relatively okay under Gary Naismith last season, were disappointing in the playoffs. And I don't know, I've just got a feeling that maybe it wouldn't surprise me, obviously, if they ended up in the playoffs this season at all. I think that's where they should be aiming. I'm not sure whether they'll be in that kind of top 2 fight as maybe they have been in the last few years.
I agree with you there. The performance in the playoffs was kind of embarrassing.
Yeah.
I think Ross Forbes put on an absolute masterclass in that game. Edinburgh City, it's always really, really hard to kind of judge them, I feel, because my heart always wants to say like they're kind of in that last position, they're in that same position that Falkirk are in, where you would think, right, this year,
yep.
And with Airdrie, where it's like this year,
this
has got to be the one.
You could say the same for Elgin, the amount of years they've been in League 2 as well, and we can say, surely it's going to be this year.
But they need to get guys in that can get them over the line, and I believe they've now lost Blair Henderson and Conrad Ballatoni are 2 big losses for them. I think Henderson maybe not playing as much recently, but we know he can score goals. They need to get guys that can come in and get them over that line, and they need to really, really be consistent. And again, kind of like the opposite of what we saw when we're talking about with other teams. I found Edinburgh City to disappoint in the games that it should have been really easy to get themselves kind of hyped up for. The big games, they kind of disappeared a wee bit, and that's the same with the playoffs. They kind of disappeared in those big moments. The change in manager, Gary Naismith's a guy who's obviously got his 5 promoted. He knows he's been there, he's done that, he's a good guy to have at the head. But the players really, really need to kind of get themselves kind of sighted up and not really get in their own heads too much in the big games. Because in the wee games, and not that there is any wee games, but in the kind of games you expect them to kind of win, they do really, really well.
It's a nice bit of backtracking there.
Yeah, I know.
Right, guys, obviously it's been great. Looking forward to the weekend, and I'm sure we'll have plenty more to discuss about the results next week as well. But for the final part of this week's podcast, we're going to have a quick chat about the price of lower league football. There's been quite a lot of kind of social media discussion around this, obviously with clubs releasing their season ticket prices as well as their kind of walk up on the day prices as well. So let's have a quick chat about that. Right, guys, the reason I wanted to talk about this is because there was I think it was a mix between like Airdrie fans and Clyde fans and a few others all mixing in on Twitter, people we know and people that listen to the podcast, which is fantastic. So we thought that we could have a quick chat about this before we wrap up this week.
People listening to this?
Sorry?
People listening to this? Sure.
I thought you were in charge of that stuff.
I just do it, I don't look.
Right, so the price of Scottish lower league football, to anybody listening or watching, the discussion seemed to be that, I think for example, and Ali, I think you correct me if I'm wrong here, I think for example Clyde, obviously the club we support, what is it, 18 quid walk up prices to get into the games? 17, sorry. Morton, I'm sure, is 20 quid as well. I think Airdrie is something like 18, 19 quid. I think that was how the discussion started.
As well. I think the caveat to that was their streams are £15 as well as
the walk-up price. Right, okay. And I think Clyde's was like 12 quid over the course of last season. Again, we could spend a whole podcast on this, and we might actually further down the line, but we'll just have a quick chat about this before we wrap up. Ross, might seem like an obvious one, but is lower league football in Scotland too expensive, and is it putting people off?
Yes and yes. I think that, especially for the first weekend post-COVID, that clubs should be doing everything they can to get as many people within reason, with the capacity limits, into their grounds. And if that means that for one game you drop your ticket prices, you do kids go free, you do whatever it is, you get people through the door. And over the course of the last year and however many months now, people have lost jobs, people have had significantly reduced income, and we've been talking about this since we started, and even before that, how excited we all are. That feeling is shared by football fans up and down the country. Now, come 5 o'clock on Saturday night, a lot of people, probably us included, are not going to feel like that. But the excitement that comes back to that, seeing your friends, seeing people you know, getting to see your team properly, not on a laptop screen, not on a phone screen, whatever it is, clubs should be taking absolute advantage of that. And they are taking advantage of fans, but not in a positive sense. They are taking the piss with prices, in my opinion. I feel that League One clubs in particular, the price for League One football is shocking. I don't feel that there's many teams in League One, if any, that can really justify that.
No, I agree.
That kind of pricing.
I think Falkirk was always the example, wasn't it, last season? It was
Falkirk in the first season I can understand, because they came down for the Championship. There was still that allure of we're probably going to bounce back.
Yeah.
They're now, season 3
Yep.
in League One? It's shocking.
It is, and I think that I know it's a kind of default argument that people often come back to is, if, for example, you've got people who maybe aren't traditionally football fans or who live in the local area and want to do something, whether it's themselves or their partner, their kids or whatever it is, they'll look at that, the pricing structure on the websites, and they'll be like, that's like, I'm anywhere between 50 to 100 quid potentially, depending on who's going, like just to get in, never mind on top of all the other costs. And we've discussed this on previous podcasts over the last season or two as well. I know COVID, Ali's been used as a kind of excuse, I guess, and I get it is justifiable, but when rightly Ross raises the points about the impact that COVID's had on people's livelihoods and things like that, where do you stand with the kind of pricing?
It's atrocious. The pricing's absolutely disgusting. I'm not pulling my punches. The Scottish national team is going to be £20 to £25 for the qualifiers going forward. Why would you pay £18, £20 to see Morton, Airdrie, Clyde, when you can go and see the best players in the world for a couple of quid more? The teams can use COVID as an excuse all they want. The problem with football prices is quite simple. I feel Scotland has 2 golden gooses laying all the eggs. Every TV deal has to be negotiated around the Old Firm. The media revolves around the Old Firm. Take a look at Premier Sports, for example, buying the League Cup rights and then not knowing what to do when Rangers and Celtic were in the semi-finals, you know what I mean? And the issue with that is, to young fans and fans of a certain age, if the media, the TV, the SFA, everyone tells you that the buck stops with the Old Firm and you make them out to be the biggest thing in the country and the be all and end all for Scottish football, then there's no attraction to go and see a League One or a League Two game, because you would rather sit at home and watch Rangers and Celtic, or you'd rather watch the English Premier League or whatever. And then the issue becomes that clubs have to then charge more and more and more, and like, see, Clyde won't be the only team in this position. During COVID, I'm sure a lot of teams lost a lot of fans, and at times it was absolutely heartbreaking to see like guys that you've known from, like, for me, since I was 11, you can't see them about the ground, and that'll be the case all over, but there's not people to come in and take those seats. And the reason for that again is the media make the Old Firm out to be so important and the be all and end all in Scottish football. So then the clubs have to charge more because they have to make more money off the fans that they actually have. Mm-hmm. And then the fans that they actually have aren't happy about it because you're having to fork out more money to see substandard football. And like if you're a fan of Brecon last season, for example, you're paying a lot of money to watch a team that you know are struggling and not playing well, but you do it out of habit. And there's some boards out there and some teams out there that will take advantage of their fans no matter what, and they'll run the club, and their money will be so important. But we need to get away from this idea that lower league football isn't real football and something of like a sideshow, like a freak show kind of thing, like a freak fight, like a Jake Paul kind of weird freak fight thing, you know what I mean?
Can I just jump in with 2 points on that, Alex? See, just to kind of add on to the point you made about the national team, I saw somebody reply to the tweet that was the genesis of this conversation, saying their season ticket at Norwich, who are obviously playing in the Premier League this year, equates to, I think it was about £26 per game. And that's for Premier League football. You're watching some of, we can talk about the merits of English Premier League another time, but like big teams for realistically what, about £7-8 more than you're paying to see League One football in Scotland. I mean, really?
It's
the
mad.
other thing for me is, down there, I think it was you that made the point, see if I'm a family of 2 adults and 2 kids and I'm going to same come on for Tom Sheet going to see Clyde and I'm not getting change out of 30-40 quid before I went into a club shop, kids want to buy a football top or a scarf or whatever, say it is 2 scarves, they're not getting change really out of 10-15 quid, if, maybe for a top as well, that's obviously even more. You then need to feed them and then go and watch the game that they're potentially probably not going to enjoy at that level, or you could go and pay 40 quid to go to the cinema that you know they'll enjoy and want to do again. So that feeds into that thing you're saying, Ali, that you're not getting that repeat customer, you're not encouraging people to come back in.
Yeah.
There needs to be a better product on the pitch, which feeds into itself, that's just a natural part of football, but there's no encouragement to bring people, if they come in once, to come back. There's nothing.
But teams need to have a unique selling point.
Yeah.
And we've spoke about this before. You go to Germany and watch the football. It's an all-day event. It's an experience. You go to the football here and it's kind of feels like a soulless. Get you in, take your money, get you out the door, home. And like kind of what you were talking about as well in terms of travelling to the game. Let's not pretend that ScotRail, First Bus, etc. don't have kind of an issue to play in this as well. Like they make it pretty difficult.
Yeah.
To go and see like your teams. That I live in Glasgow, and like a train ticket from Glasgow to Croy for me to see Clyde, I believe, is now £7-8 a return. Like that is, you know, a lot of money. If I want to go to Edinburgh, it's 15 quid maybe.
It's the whole thing, to be honest, guys, and that's why I say we could have a whole podcast on this, and maybe we should, if people want to actually hear it and let us know, because it'd be quite interesting to get different people's individual perspectives on this as well, not just the conversation that was going on social media. I think to try and wrap it up, I think that there has to be more collaboration, not just between the governing bodies and the clubs, but between the clubs themselves. You know, if it is, you know, whoever you're going to see on Saturday, they could come together and be like, right, well, you know, it's going to do a tenner for an adult to get in, you know, 3-4 quid for a child, or free for a child, as we've discussed before, something like that. Even if it is just for the first game of the season and the last game of the season, it's a start. Yeah. It's a start, but I do think over the course there does have to be greater collaboration. We've moaned about the SFA for so long. Fair play to them for lowering the prices for the competitive games for Scotland, because a year ago or 2 years ago it would have been 35-40 quid to go to the games in September. Now, you know, for the kind of, you know, the main stand, the North Stand for example, it's I'm getting a ticket for 20 quid. Do you know what I mean? I know it's not much, but they can clearly see, and they're getting praise for it as well. I think other clubs, where possible, have to try and do that. And last but certainly not least, and we seem to end every podcast by by bringing this up, maybe some of the SPFL clubs should look to the West of Scotland League for some inspiration when it comes to getting people in the door, the experience of the day, and the pricing as well. And I think that is quite a decent way to wrap up this week's Talking Lower League. Like I say, we could go on forever, and hopefully we will, but we just can't tonight.
Stop telling people things are shite and then being surprised they don't want to get involved in it.
I thought what I said was decent to finish, and even better way to finish. Ross, as ever, thank you so much. Ali, all joking aside, brilliant to have you back in person, for the three of us to be back in person for the first time since, like I said, February or March 2020. It feels brilliant. Like I say, we've got so many great plans for the season ahead. Well, we think we're great, you guys will tell us ultimately. Mind you, Ross says nobody's listening, so none of this matters. But thank you in all seriousness for all your support, all your feedback for last week's episode. Like I say, we're trying some things differently. We're going to try, you know, keep trying things and see how it goes. So let us know any questions, feedback you've got for us, and especially if you're watching on YouTube, which we're trying to put a bit more effort into as well, make sure to like and subscribe please, and hit that wee bell, you know, the wee bell, because if you like the bell, rumour has it that a bell automatically appears in your home, so anytime that we post stuff, Like, it doesn't matter, 3 in the morning, it could be anything that could wake your whole family up. Your bell will go off. So, I mean, we've already got ours. Has it affected your life much?
You've woken me up twice already with it. But
None of that matters because you're getting this content, right? So any support would be much appreciated.